the world. One of the reasons is the country's inclusion of the LGBTi rights in the constitution. LGBTi stands for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender and intersex people. Despite the constitution enshrining equal rights, the nation holds a complicated relationship with its LGBTi community. Now, the focus tends to be mostly on gay men and lesbian women. Transgender women and men are often forgotten in the discourse of LGBTi rights. Since this is Women's Month, we thought we should highlight the plight of transgender women in South Africa. And for more, we joined in studio by Ditshego Ditshego. You say it twice.
Just say it twice, yes.
Thank you very much indeed. You're a freelance journalist and you're going to, enlighten us. Let's start off at the very beginning. What does transgender mean?
Thank you for this opportunity, Blaine. So what happens is when you're born, society looks, the medical professionals look what's between your legs and determine what your sex is. And basically what a transgender person is a person who does not identify with the gender that they were assigned at birth. I think that's also the confusion. People like to say, no, they were born male, but now living and behaving as women. We were never born male. We were assigned male at birth. And I think how we phrase these things also plays a large role in how we are perceived and received, and also how then the society reacts to us. So basically a transgender person is a person who does not identify with the sex they were assigned at birth.
Tell us about your story, Ditshego. When you were growing up, at what age did you know that you are transgender?
Well, for the longest time, I just identified as a gay man. I just thought I was a really gay man, a very overtly feminine, somewhat fabulous and very flamboyant, but I just thought I was a gay man. And then it took me living in the States for a while where I had no one to account to, where I had no boundaries. I literally had a clean, fresh slate. And I found that everything I did, everything I said was female. And also not just that, but everybody already just sort of walked into a room and assumed I was female, or assumed I was already in the process of transitioning. And it's sort of it was an outward sort of reaction. It was a reaction to the outward world, but it made me have an introspection, and I really sat down and thought, you know what, this is what I have always been, this is what I have always seen myself as. I might not have identified as this, but this is what I've always been. And that's part of the problem, or the complications rather, let's not use the word problem, with transgender people, is that it can be sort of complicated in terms of diagnosing it, for lack of a better word, because a lot of people who are transgender don't even know that they're transgender themselves, and that's what makes it so complicated in terms of ascertaining statistics for HIV and employment and that sort of general spectrum. So it is quite a it's quite, I don't want to say messy, but it's and it's not new either, because everybody says, oh, you're all identifying as transgender now because it's in fashion, and it's not in fashion. We've always been there. We may not have had the terms to describe ourselves, but we've always been around, and we're not going anywhere.
I mean, seemingly people think it's in fashion, it's in vogue. We have the likes of celebrities, Laverne Cox, we have Caitlyn Jenner, you know, seemingly putting out the message there and getting more education around transgender. But still needs to be more education around what people go through. And tell us some of the challenges that transgender people go through.
Finding the right shoe size, for one. But we have a lot of challenges. I mean, if you look at gay men, if you compare what in terms of where gay rights are today, compare that to transgender rights, we are 16 years behind. Gay men are a lot more progressive. There's almost there's a gay storyline for every soapie right now in the country, and largely in part because of representation. Gay men are represented in the highest offices in the land. We have gay people in parliament, we have gay people on TV, and we don't have that for transgender people, and that's part of the problem. But the challenges we face are enormous. The first one being, or the most common one being, changing your gender marker on your ID and your driver's license, whether or not you've had the surgery, because some institutions don't want to allow you to change unless you've had the physical change. And not all transgender men and women want to have the change, by the way, physically. For some people, it is enough to self-identify and to say, yes, I have a penis, but I am a woman, and I am not, and it's not going anywhere, and I don't want to do anything about it, and it's enough for me to know. And for things like changing your gender marker, that is one of the biggest challenges. And just also getting acknowledgement and for people to treat you as that which you identify as. And especially speaking from a perspective of a transgender woman, one of our biggest challenges, or one of the biggest obstacles that we face, are from cisgender women, which are straight women. Because for some strange reason, some women believe they own womanhood, or they think there isn't enough of it to go around, and they feel like they have to claim it or hog it. And there really is that much of it. And a lot of people just deny you what you think you are. They think you're crazy. And also within the LGBTi community itself, the trans community faces a lot of problems. We have a lot of people saying things like, listen, I understand gay men. That's a man that wants them, that is in love with another man. It's these ones that think they're women that I have a problem with, you know. So even within the LGBTi community, we face a lot of problems. We also face problems within the service industry, you know, whether you want to, whether you're going to a doctor for a checkup, and even something as minuscule as using a bathroom, a public bathroom. And some people, you know, like I said, those who do not want to transition will be met with rejection and just negative response when they are trying to use a female bathroom. And we have people like Trump who are saying we cannot allow them to use the bathrooms they identify with, because they might get into a female bathroom and harass them, and which is also absurd, because that's anecdotal, and there are no statistics on transgender men and women having assaulted anybody, minor or otherwise, you know. So there's a lot of challenges we face from the society, perceptions, service providers. We are challenged from everywhere, and the fight is really, really long.
The simple use of a bathroom, I mean, talk to us about the challenges of getting employment, and you know how it fits into that.
Employment is a definite problem. The biggest problem, or the biggest cause rather, being that there's a lot of transgender people drop out of school, and I'm not even talking university. A lot of us don't even make it to university level, and it's not always because of lack of funds, but because of bullying and suicidal thoughts. And a lot of us are so close to the age. It's really quite sad. So the biggest contributing factor is that a lot of transgender men and women aren't qualified, so they do not have the skills to enter into the job market. The second challenge is that even those of us who do have the skills get into the job market, but employers don't know what to do with us. They don't know how to address us. They don't know how to sort of place us. We're this awkward, shapeless thing that doesn't fit into any mold, and they don't know what to do with us. So therefore, we end up not being employed. And as a result, a lot of transgender women are now sex workers. And one may argue that it's, there is a huge demand for it. I mean, if you're talking fetishes and what have you, but from the transgender perspective, they're not responding to a fetish demand. They are responding to a socio-economic demand, because they have needs that need to be met, and money is and they need to, you know, generate an income, and sex work seems to be the only one that they are qualified for, unfortunately. And that's part of the problems. It's also one of the reasons why, and a lot of transgender women, because of the work they do, live secret lives. So it's difficult for us to access them, which then makes it difficult for us to, again, gather statistics. So even when we are planning interventions and we are trying to help transgender men and women, we can't access them, because a lot of them are living secret lives, and they are in places that we cannot otherwise reach. So the employment factor is a huge one, and it's a vicious circle, because it doesn't seem to be getting any better.
What about obtaining an identity document? Is it a pretty simple task, or is it more arduous?
It should be a simple task. I mean, they claim that if you want to change your surname or your gender marker, it should just cost you 140 rands at any of your Home Affairs offices. But you get there and you are met with ridicule, and you are mocked. And even as we share our experiences, we are deterring those we are sharing with, because they don't want to experience that, you know, the humiliation. So on paper, our constitution and institutions like the Home Affairs should service us. They should serve us. It should be quite a basic thing. The only tedious thing should be the waiting period, because changing a name and changing a gender marker is quite a long process, but it shouldn't be one that is met with obstacles. But unfortunately, it's something that a lot of us struggle with, and end up having to either lose them, or, you know, just not putting yourself in a position where you have to present an ID document just because you know that they're going to read it and it's going to say male, and you're going to be standing there looking like a slay queen.
Yeah. Ditshego, thank you very much indeed for your time. Great insight in terms of what transgender people are currently facing in terms of the problems. And I guess there there is hope with regards to, we were talking about the difference in terms of perception between urban areas and rural areas, and you were saying that there's a greater acceptance in rural areas.
Absolutely. For some strange reason, in my line of work, the women, the transgender women that I have interviewed who live in the rural areas seem to be having a lot more acceptance, and I don't know if it is because transphobia is a Western export and the rural areas have not been fully penetrated by the Western sort of culture and norms and developments, and maybe that is why they are not met with so much obstruction. But also it makes you wonder if, because of that lack of Western penetration, that is the reason for the acceptance, and when and if the West does penetrate it, if that will also just be a natural occurrence. But a lot of those of us who live in urban areas are certainly met with more obstacles, and I suppose you could say, with development there must be sacrifices, and maybe we are the sacrificial lamb that came with development, because development is not responding to us, and we are able and capable of keeping up with it, but it is not allowing us, it is not affording us a seat at the table.
Ditshego, thank you very much indeed. Once again, pleasure talking to you. That was Ditshego Ditshego, a transgender woman who also works as a freelance journalist.